Hello and welcome to today's WorkSafe Month webinar, Putting the I in Risk Assessment in Novel Workplace Design. I'm Stephanie Maree from WorkSafe Tasmania and I will be your moderator. Before we start, please take a moment to read the following slide about information received today. I'll now go over housekeeping. Here is a screenshot of the attendee control panel. You should see something that looks like this on the right hand of your screen. You're likely listening in using your computer speaker system by default. If you would prefer to listen over the phone, just select telephone in the audio pane and the dial-in information will be displayed. Webcams and audience microphones will not be used in today's webinar. Questions will be taken at the end of the presentation. Please, however, use your questions pane on the control panel to type and submit your questions at any time during the presentation. Finally, today's webinar is being recorded. I would now like to introduce your presenters from the Tasmanian Ergonomic Collaborative, Daniella, Polita and Andrea Ireland, who will be leading today's webinar, along with Lorna, Farquhar, Liz Freeman and Maree Webber. The Tasmanian Ergonomic Collaborative are a team of occupational therapists and physiotherapists working in their own practices across Tasmania who collectively have over 150 years of experience providing ergonomic health and wellbeing advice to Tasmanian businesses. As the name suggests, the method of providing services is collaborative, which facilitates the scaling of services and ensures that the evidence behind recommendations are based upon sound principles of latest research evidence, which are applied using clinical reasoning and in reference to a collaborative body of knowledge. Welcome, everyone. Our first presenter today is Daniella Polita from the Tasmanian Ergonomic Collaborative. Welcome, Daniella.
Thanks, Steph. Good morning all and welcome to our session. My name is Daniella and I have with me today Andrea, Maree and Liz. Unfortunately, Lorna was unable to make it. However, she is with us in spirit. As Stephanie mentioned, we are a team of occupational therapists and physiotherapists who work together as the Tasmanian Ergonomic Collaborative. Our presentation is titled, Putting the I in Risk Assessment in Novel Workplace Design. So today we will be covering a brief review of ergonomics as it pertains to good work design and novel workplace design, what putting the I in risk assessment means, an overview of each of the biopsychosocial model domains, and case studies to illustrate these individual domains, as well as providing you with some examples of conversation starters for use in your workplace to guide novel workplace design conversations. We cannot start a presentation such as this without mentioning COVID-19. As a result of COVID-19, our lives have changed. Gone are the days of driving or commuting to work in an office in the CBD from Monday to Friday, 9 to 5. Life as we know it, including the concept of normal and normal workplaces, has changed. COVID forced us to recreate how we work. For example, teaching occurred from Zoom classrooms. Personal training sessions occurred over video link. 24/7 factory operations had to schedule idle machine time to limit direct crossover of staff between shifts. Health appointments became telehealth consults. Hospital wards had to find ways to have team handovers without the whole team. Conferences and board meetings occurred virtually from multiple home offices, living rooms, and kitchen bench tops across multiple time zones. We are most definitely in an age of changing or novel workplace design. Prior to COVID, I would have touted novel workplace design as design that is customised to the individual and the workplace, lending itself to hybrid work including flexible work days and hours, completing weekly hours over longer work days to facilitate taking an extra day off, or balancing family responsibilities, working from home, working out of a car, using co-working and multi-purpose workspaces and desk sharing. These emerging changes were certainly gaining momentum. However, the experience of COVID has forced us to implement novel designs in ways we could not have imagined. So why stop now? Our session is titled Putting the I in Risk Assessment in Novel Workplace Design. It's actually about taking into account my and your unique needs and how these can be considered to optimally adapt workplace tasks and work designs to ensure that I am, you are, and we are optimally productive and effective when performing work moving forwards. After all, fitting the task to the human is the fundamental basis of ergonomics, and optimal work and productivity depends on a positive workplace culture with shared trust and feeling valued as core to the process. So what does ergonomics have to do with design? The IEA defines ergonomics as a scientific discipline concerned with the understanding of interactions amongst humans and other elements of a system. Or in layman's terms, it's concerned with understanding human capabilities and how we work, and then applying this knowledge to the design of equipment, tools, systems, and processes of work, fitting the task of the human. Not the converse, which is expecting humans to fit into a predetermined framework for how work is performed and designed. And ergonomics is always collaborative. Before we go on, it may be useful to briefly and broadly reflect on the concepts of good work design, and the health benefits of good work, as the intention behind novel work design is to align with the principles of good work design. Our presentation scope is purposefully limited to focusing on presenting the biopsychosocial model. However, it is necessary to acknowledge that there are other broader systems models and initiatives that look at what constitutes good work design. We have added some links to key resources at the end of this presentation for anyone wanting to pursue a more in-depth understanding. Simply put, ergonomics in its truest form supports good work design by preventing psychological and musculoskeletal disorders, many of which can develop over time and can lead to long-term disability or chronic health conditions. It ensures that work tasks are optimally efficient, effective, and safe, and in doing so reduces errors, lowers costs, increases productivity, improves quality, and enhances worker comfort and engagement. Ergonomics considers the work tasks performed within the context of organisational purpose, outputs, and goals, and facilitates continuous improvement by promoting inquiry and problem solving, and ultimately uses a consultative process. So, when asking Google to define risk assessment, this simple definition is provided. This definition simply summarises our intention to present a framework that is capable of identifying risk factors that can inform decision-making around optimal work design for each individual. The 4 steps to managing work health and safety risks, as presented by Safe Work Australia, are identify hazards, assess the risks, control the risks, and review the control measures to ensure they are working as planned. Risk assessment and management is a consultative process and is only successful if consultation occurs at all levels of the organisation with management buy-in. Noting that in this presentation we are applying the biopsychosocial model as the framework for identifying risk factors that may be impacting on an individual working within a new or novel workplace design. As briefly touched on previously, the I pertains to individual and is distinct from applying a one-size-fits-all model to work design. in line with the understanding that we are designing the work to fit the individual, not the collective. It is therefore necessary to undertake this inquiry on an individual basis, with the onus of responsibility falling heavily on the individual to reflect and engage honestly in the process on a participatory basis. At this juncture, it's especially important to reinforce that people will only engage in conversations that may highlight vulnerabilities when they feel safe, unprejudiced, respected and heard, and do not fear retribution or that their individual factors are going to cause discrimination. There are many resources and articles readily available online on creating a positive workplace culture, and references to a couple of recent articles are included in the reference and resource list at the end of this presentation. We will be using the Biopsychosocial Model as the framework for individual assessment. This framework has traditionally been used in injury management as a means for identifying barriers contributing to incapacity. We have chosen to use the biopsychosocial model for its simplicity and its similarity with the three domains of human factors and ergonomics. So now we are going to run a poll and ask the question, are you familiar with the biopsychosocial model? If you can answer yes or no when prompted, the results will be tabulated to give us a percentage score. So I will just give it a minute to be implemented. Thanks, Steph.
We'll close the poll shortly. I'll close the poll and share the results.
Great, excellent. So we've got a few more no's than yeses, which is good to see. So this information will be new to most of you. So for those who are not so familiar, let's have a look. Steph, can we go back to the slides? Okay, we'll just get the next slide up. So here is a pictorial representation of the biopsychosocial model. This model was first proposed by George Engel in 1977 in an attempt to broaden doctors' perspectives when assessing a medical condition. It has since been reviewed for use by Gordon Waddell and Kim Burton in the early 2000s as the basis for assessing and preventing incapacity in persons with a work-related musculoskeletal disorder or disability. The three key domains are biological, psychological, and social. Each domain should be considered so that customised strategies can be developed for each individual worker, understanding that the same solutions and considerations will not be relevant for all workers. What we are proposing is that strategies can be developed according to holistic assessment of the worker in the context of their individual needs and preferences and the environment and work demands. It is essential that the worker is engaged in the process of decision making and solution identification. Today we will discuss this model in more detail and provide some case examples, hopefully broadening your current perceptions of risk assessment for individuals in the new normal workplaces we find ourselves in. So we are going to start with a case study, Philip, who Andrea will now introduce. Over to you, Andrea.
So Philip is 48 years old. He works as a project officer for a government department. Philip lives with his wife, who is a nurse, and two teenage boys who are 16 and 14 years old. His house is located 45 minutes away from the CBD. Prior to COVID-19, Philip would drive to his mother's place in an inner city suburb and park his car. He would check in on his mother and he would catch the bus into the city for work. Since COVID in March, however, Philip has been working from home. So here are the main points for you to review about our first case study. Philip has set up his workstation in the sitting area of his bedroom, and he is experiencing some discomfort in his mid-back that radiates into his shoulders and his neck. Philip notified his employer, who provided a workstation checklist and subsequently organised a telehealth workstation assessment. Recommendations were made to optimise workstation setup, with one of the key recommendations being advice to move more. Throughout the assessment, Philip advised the assessor that he was under increasing pressure to return to the workplace. However, noted that he was more productive at home, which he has been able to actually evidence to his supervisor. Philip noted that his team has implemented a check-in and check-out process, which requires him to document key targets and tasks at the beginning of the day and then to provide a summary of the work completed at the end. These mandatory tasks have increased his workload. Philip has also been advised that he must log in and out whenever he takes breaks. And Philip reported that this level of scrutiny feels overbearing. He advised the telehealth assessor that he does not feel he can take a full lunch break or incidental breaks throughout the day, such as to make a cup of tea or even to visit the bathroom, as he needs to immediately respond to team chats or otherwise his whereabouts are questioned. So please keep Philip in mind as we discuss the individual domains of the biopsychosocial model. We will return to Philip regularly throughout this presentation.
Thanks, Andrea. The first domain is the biological, and this is where we consider individual physical makeup, predispositions and preferences, which includes the areas outlined on the slide. So, some questions that I need to consider of myself may be, am I susceptible to illness, or do I have a condition that makes me vulnerable? Do my medications have undesirable side effects, such as increasing my sleepiness and fatigue or decreasing my alertness? And if so, does it impact on my ability to safely drive or operate heavy machinery or engage in cognitively demanding or vigilance tasks for extended periods? Do I have a physical or mental health condition that has an effect on my endurance or tolerance or requires flexibility and support to manage? And do I understand my health risks? Other factors to consider are things like our natural circadian rhythms or sleep-wake cycles, as these are very individual. Chronotype refers to your preference for being optimally wakeful and essentially productive. Some people work best in the afternoons or late into the evening. Other people work best in the morning. Chronotype is a research predictor of health-impairing behaviours. Equally, we know that being in receipt of good sleep is essential to being able to focus, concentrate, and perform. Anthropometrics, or our body measurement, is important to determine work design. For example, am I 193 centimetres tall or 137 centimetres tall? The physical requirements required to support me performing my work tasks for my stature and build alone will be significantly different. This is a place where mainstream workstation assessments have focused in typical office design and setup. Additionally, the biological assessment takes into account factors such as forces acting on the body, activity repetition, adopted postures, general fitness, as well as both diet and health habits. So alcohol consumption, smoking, healthy eating. Over time, our exposure to risk factors can lead to musculoskeletal disorders and chronic health conditions. We know this as there is a significant evidence and published data to support this assertion. So this brings us to challenges. This information can be gathered from both informal and formal sources, such as workstation screening assessments, which we do a lot of, health assessments, or even as a standard point of discussion on a supervision agenda. We have prepared a list of conversation starters to assist supervisors and managers with inquiry under each of the biopsychosocial domains. This list is by no means exhaustive. However, it is prepared to facilitate you starting conversations. And we are happy to provide a copy to anyone interested, and it will be available on our website as well. So, some conversation starters you might like to have with your worker that support the identification of biological challenges may include: have you completed a workstation screening assessment? And if so, what flags has this raised? Have you been taking regular breaks? And if not, what are some of the barriers? These are just a couple of questions, and we have a list of them, as mentioned, available. Let's return to our case study, Philip. Over to you, Andrea.
So just to refresh, here are the main points about Philip. I'll just give you a moment to review those. So now we've got a couple of questions for you to consider. The first one is, in considering the case study of Philip, can you identify some of the biological issues associated with his case? Workstation setup was a contributor to discomfort. Chair height was raised, monitor height was raised, and keyboard location and reach was optimized for keying purposes. The only other issue was a lack of incidental activity, with all his amenities being within a 15-metre radius of his workstation, and Philip advising that he did not feel that he could leave his workstation. A recommendation was made for Philip to move more during the day, and education was provided to both Philip and his workplace to highlight the impact that moving has on health and well-being. In addition, recommendations were made to encourage Philip to find and to protect time to participate in a regular activity and exercise, such as using part of the time that he previously spent commuting to work to actually take a walk or to attend a local gym. Philip reported 2 weeks following the assessment that his symptoms were resolving, but they had not yet fully resolved. So before we move on, let's live what we preach. Let's stand up, let's have a quick stretch, let's have a wiggle. Although I do note that we probably don't want to achieve this particular position that's actually demonstrated here in front of us. Why don't we have a few minutes to just have a stretch?
Okay, great. Let's move on to the psychological and social factors. These are often considered in tandem. However, there are differences. I'll give you some time to read through the definitions we have listed here. We will explore elements of both independently in the next few slides to provide some clarity as is needed to conceptualise these domains in the biopsychosocial model. First, the psychological domain. Remembering that psychological factors are individual, often personal processes that influence mental states, and ultimately influence function and how we interact with the world around us. This slide provides a few examples of factors that contribute to the psychological domain. These are intrinsic to the individual. They're not likely to be directly or immediately influenced with external input, and they are highly likely to differ between individuals. For example, if I compare my satisfaction or my sense of well-being to a cup of tea, how do I perceive my cup? Is it half full or half empty? Is it overflowing, underwhelming, or with capacity for more challenges? And in addition, do I want to be challenged and stretched? Am I wanting a change? There are certainly aspects of the psychological domain that cross over into the social domain, and there are some contingencies between them. For example, what may seem a simple workplace change may be the straw that will break the camel's back for an individual. A working from home example is considering if the individual is dependent on the workplace for their social outlet. Are they attending work to escape from an undesirable environment at home? That is not to say that external inputs cannot or do not influence the mental state. However, recognition of the underlying state is needed before external efforts can be geared towards supporting identifiable changes. What motivates me may not be what motivates my colleague. How engaged am I in the outputs that I am delivering? Do I feel that my efforts make a difference and can be seen as contributing to a wider organisational strategy? Questions such as what life stage am I at? Am I beginning my career, inexperienced and keen to learn, working towards the end of my career, or somewhere in the middle perhaps? Am I pregnant or wanting to be? Am I returning to work after injury, illness, or pregnancy? These are some of the questions that can be used to explore the psychological domain. We know that if people feel valued, acknowledged, and heard, performance will often increase, bringing us back to the need for a positive workplace culture. So, where work design results in remote working, the greatest challenge is how to effectively monitor psychological factors influencing well-being when our direct face-to-face contact is limited. After all, these are not necessarily evidenced immediately in bottom-line deliverables. In the past, we've relied heavily on the face-to-face interpersonal connection with others to gauge when our colleagues may be tired, stressed, dissatisfied, even angry. This is undertaken by observing body behaviour, body language, or patterns and nuances in conversation that occur over time and are measured against a subconscious baseline of knowing that person's predisposition, their personalities, their likes and dislikes. Usually when we detect a change in pattern, we often seek information to confirm or deny our impressions, and then we work on a strategy to provide encouragement, to soothe or support. This is human nature working at its best. However, this becomes challenging when working remotely or with a transient workforce. In traditional office environments, the value of the corridor conversations and the water cooler catch-ups and staff room debriefs or the coffee and chat have been essential in aiding co-workers, managers and peers navigating some of these psychological elements. The key now is to find other means of catching up. So, for example, structured formal and informal supervision, or brief face-to-face attendance at a workplace or social event. So some examples of conversation starters may also be, what are some of the key factors that make a good day good or a bad day bad? This is work-wise or otherwise. And do you feel that the work role you perform is valued in your workplace by your supervisor, by your peers and colleagues? So now, again, back to Andrea.
So I have another question for you. In considering the case study of Philip, can you identify some of the psychological issues that are associated with his case? Just to refresh, here are the main points about Philip. The psychological impacts for Philip are that he believes that in taking breaks means that he will be perceived as not being as productive and getting work completed. And therefore he's working longer hours than when he worked in the office to ensure that this perception cannot be applied to him. Recommendations may be to implement strict hours of work and to reinforce that taking breaks is acceptable and even expected. Or maybe this is a compromise that Philip is willing to make in order to be able to work from home, provided that the breaks are taken as recommended. His belief is that the reduction in travel time is providing a greater opportunity to increase productivity. But this time instead could be used for exercise to improve both his physical and mental health. Philip's belief is also that his supervisor is scrutinising him to get him back into the workplace. The solution may be to engage in a discussion about the best way to manage tasks and performance outcomes that serves both Philip and his team. So back to you, Danny.
Let's move now onto the social domain as it pertains to the individual, which is different from the social domain as it pertains to the workplace. The biopsychosocial model outlines the key social factors influencing or having influence over each person to include those listed here. So, some conversation starters and questions to explore may be, what are the competing occupational roles in my life that impact on my resilience and energy to perform work tasks? For example, am I a carer or a single parent? How can I compartmentalise work tasks, and in what environment is this optimally effective? As working from home may not be the most viable option if the environment is distracting and uncompromising. Financially, am I comfortable or burdened with a high mortgage or debts, or am I supporting other family members as well as my own? Can my workplace provide solutions that support better financial planning, such as salary packaging, or provide me with access to financial services advice? And what are some of the cultural, religious, social, or friendship activities that impact on my available time and resources? All of these factors and more influence the individual social domain and need to be understood. So conversations for managers and supervisors instead of those that pertain to me may be things like, are you a people person or do you prefer your own company? When considering the social impacts of a positive workplace, when considering the social impacts, a positive workplace culture is again important. Workplaces need to be perceived as safe for an individual to fully participate. Each workplace has its own characteristics and culture. These are evidenced in processes, systems, and behaviours espoused by management and expected of workers. These include expectations around work hours, such as being available via phone or email after hours, or putting in long hours to get the job done with or without flex time. The design and layout of the work environment influences the social domain of the workplace, how people are arranged in teams, in offices, and how the environment lends itself to reinforcing hierarchy. The preferred communication styles and methods within the workplace also influence the workplace social environment, and perhaps most significantly, the social opportunities and interpersonal relationships that develop in the workplace which we will expand upon further in the next slide. So, some conversation starters to discuss the social domain in the context of the workplace may be: is social support at work important to you? And do you feel included and part of a team? With the social factors of the individual layered over the social factors of the workplace, the challenge exists as to how to meet needs of both to enhance the social well-being and productivity of the individual within the context of meeting organisational goals. People have varying needs for social connection and face-to-face engagement with others, and this can differ widely outside of work as it relates to family, religious or cultural responsibilities. These factors will often influence a person's preference for work location and design. For example, and we have used this example a little earlier in the presentation, an individual who is a carer may see work as the only opportunity they have for social contact outside of their at-home responsibilities. And for this individual, the distinction between work and home life is imperative to their social and psychological well-being. Social interaction in the workplace can be both formal or informal. So formal interactions are things such as meetings, and they are typically designed to support organisational communication and are aimed at fulfilling organisational imperatives and goals. Informal social interaction, on the other hand, can take many forms, such as incidental, I just need to bend your ear, or lunchroom discussions and coffee runs. The content of these informal interactions may still relate to work and work activities, but can and often do also provide non-work related social interaction. There is great benefit in the personal nature of informal workplace communication, as it allows people to discuss day-to-day matters or things that are important to them personally. This communication is how we relate to each other as humans rather than purely colleagues. Whilst many formal aspects of work have continued via video calls, the challenge is, how do we replace these more informal corridor conversations when working remotely or in a transient team? Creative and tailored solutions will be required. So back to Andrea for the final instalment of Philip.
So a final question. In considering the case study of Philip, can you identify some of the social issues that are associated with his case? I'll give you a moment to think on these. And just to refresh, here are the main points about Philip. So if we consider the social aspect, particularly focusing on the individual, we see that previously Philip parked at his mother's place and he bussed into work, which provided an incidental opportunity for him to touch base with her and make sure she was okay. Perhaps this could be supported by attending the workplace for a couple of days per week, rather than every day. Or maybe Philip could use his flex time accrued due to the extended work hours to have time to visit his mother. The social workplace factors, as reinforced by the supervisor's behaviour and implementations, include the perception that if people are not in the workplace, that they are not being productive, and that working from home is a privilege. This may require creative engagement strategies, such as virtual open door meetings, or running topic chat pages, to ensure that all workers at any workplace can engage fully and effectively at any time from any space in which they are working. Okay, so once again, time to stand up, to have a stretch, and perhaps even do a few mini squats before we move on to reviewing one final case study to practically apply the biopsychosocial model. So let's move on to Paula. We have selected Paula to highlight individual differences between people. Paula has a different social situation, personality, work role, and work demands to Philip, and I'm sure that many of you have countless examples of other situations. Incidentally, these two case studies that we present today are based on real-life examples that we have collected. So a bit of information about Paula. Paula is a 57-year-old female who is a senior government manager in charge of a department of over 150 people, either directly or indirectly. She lives alone. Prior to COVID-19, Paula would drive 25 minutes to a city office each day and would work on average of 10 hours a day. She would generally exercise 3 to 4 times a week, which included swimming, attending the gym, and undertaking Zumba classes. She would usually visit her elderly parents residing in a residential facility in her lunch break or after work, as well as on the weekends, to drop in shopping and to check in and provide support to them. Paula has a wide social circle and is often dining out with friends on the weekends. Her support activities ceased, however, in the early days of COVID-19, and Paula noticed that she barely saw anyone. Identifying her need for companionship, she adopted a rescue dog. Paula has been financially secure without a mortgage for a while and has recently purchased a holiday home, so she's likely to be working into her early 60s. She is, however, extremely employable in her field and is considering branching out into a consultancy role for quality of life reasons, where she can be selective about the work she undertakes. Paula's past medical history includes dominant left elbow tendonitis from work-related overuse. Paula is aware of the need for optimal workstation setup to minimise any ongoing discomfort. So since March, Paula has worked from home with a gradual introduction of a staggered part-time return to the office in June. Paula is now attending the office on average of 4 to 5 hours a day. Paula regularly chairs meetings with delegates from all around the world, travelling at least once every 2 months, if not more regularly, to undertake this role. Since COVID, however, Paula has been chairing these meetings from her home, and as you would expect, across multiple time zones. She's therefore no longer working her standard 8 a.m. to 6 p.m. workday. Paula's work has significantly increased as a result of COVID, as the work role now requires this work to be managed in addition to her usual work roles and demands. Paula has set up her office in a dedicated area of her house. She purchased an office chair from a local supplier and already had a suitable desk. Given Paula's previous history of musculoskeletal discomfort, she is aware of optimal setup and was able to utilise information from previous office assessments to guide her home setup. So what I'd like you to do is to consider the case study of Paula. Can you identify the biological, the psychological, and the social issues associated with her case? Please take a minute or two to reflect on her case and maybe jot down some notes from your own reflection under the domains that we've discussed before we return to the biopsychosocial model. So for Paula, the issues identified include changed circumstances resulting in an increased workload, a focus on ongoing support for staff, and risk factors for her own work, increased hours, fatigue, stress, performing high-demand cognitive functions out of her usual time zone with insufficient recovery time. The consequences of error is high due to the seniority of her role, and this may have both international as well as national impacts. So in relation to the biological domain, Paula reported a history of left elbow pain from overuse. Adapting and adhering to previous workstation advice, however, means that Paula is not currently experiencing any musculoskeletal discomfort. Given the additional hours that she is currently working, being aware of any slight symptom or any pain at all requires her to address these symptoms early. Alternative ergonomic equipment could also be considered if or as needed. Paula would benefit from changing her exercise regime to fit in with her new work routine. Things such as hiring a treadmill, participating in an online Zumba or Pilates class, or in walking her new dog could be considered. In fact, she's implemented walking her new dog twice a day. Paula advised that she was experiencing growing fatigue as a result of the interrupted sleep working across various time zones. She was having difficulty catching up due to the local work demands. A solution presented was to change her work hours around so that following the nights that she worked late chairing meetings, she would not commence work again for 8 hours after these meetings finished. By sharing her meeting calendar with her immediate team, everyone would know when she was available and when she was not, knowing to only contact her in her downtime if it was absolutely necessary. While there will still be some conflicts with predetermined scheduled events, on the whole, Paula's opportunity for rest and recuperation should be improved. So moving on to the psychological domain. Paula's workload has increased significantly across the department, and Paula is managing this, having identified it as a known event. Efforts are also underway at an organisational level to hire more staff and to provide Paula with another 2 people that will directly report to her. But until this happens, maybe it is possible to provide some temporary administrative or other support. Consideration could also be given to answering questions such as, can some tasks be put to one side given the current circumstances? Or can they be made into a separate project for a project team to manage? Could some tasks be assigned to outside agencies? Stress around perceived job performance is another psychological issue. Specific work associations for psychosocial risk are high demand combined with low control. Paula feels like the work demands have doubled, and she is finding keeping on top of communication exceptionally stressful due to reduced interpersonal contact and especially informal contact. Paula might benefit from turning off her phone so she cannot be contacted during her downtimes and leaving her phone home when she walks the dog. Paula has throughout this period been very mindful of the stress on her staff, specifically trying to shift work around enabling parents to be able to school their own children in the second lockdown period. As a successful senior manager, used to juggling work demands, Paula may not find it easy to seek assistance or even to recognise the potential negative effects of her feeling stressed. But perhaps she could consider using the Workplace Employee Assistance Program. Overall, Paula feels that she is burning out and is considering other work options. Maybe it is time for Paula to work through what her new workload demands are with her manager and to see if her job needs to be redesigned or parts of this reallocated. In relation to the social domain for her as an individual, there are a number of things to consider. The residential facility where Paula's parents live have imposed strict restrictions on visiting hours, and Paula feels like she is letting them down. Maybe she can work with the staff to enable FaceTime calls or other means of communicating with her parents face to face, such as Skype or Zoom. Maybe she can drop off or arrange for items to be dropped to the facility for her parents. Are other members of the family able to increase their connection with the parents, given that all communication and support now needs to be provided in a different way during lockdown? Although there is a lack of ability to visit her holiday home, is Paula able to review photos of this or of her travels overseas? Is she able to relive some of the great times that she has had there? Isolation as a result of limited social connection with her wide circle of friends that she used to have and see on weekends is another social issue. Finding alternative ways to connect is important, whether this be by phone, Zoom, FaceTime, or other. Maybe arranging to cook and then eat a meal together, but in their own separate homes over Zoom, could assist her to maintain her social contacts. Or doing a Zumba class at the same time while chatting to them on the phone. Pets can be great friends, and cuddling, patting, or chatting to her dog may be beneficial in providing her with some support when there are no others around. Maybe Paula could consider or have somebody else in her team arrange something fun for the staff to undertake to assist in their well-being. Using a fun social engagement game that can be set up on a program such as Goose Chase could be engaging. It could allow workers to connect, but by doing something different away from their work tasks. Sending a card to the workers encouraging them during this time and thanking them for their commitment is another idea to address the social workplace issues, provided that this does not increase the workload directly on her. Seeking out formal debriefing with an empathetic manager, colleague, or counsellor to support the identification and development of strategies might be beneficial, and holding Paula accountable to their implementation. Using conversation starters with her staff or undertaking a survey might help inform Paula of staff concerns and identify some strategies to assist. These could include stress management strategies from a suitably trained professional, adapting to change strategies, IT tips to optimise use of technology, or providing links to freely accessible online activities for staff, such as Pilates, yoga, or similar. Hopefully this case study on Paula has helped to highlight how this biopsychosocial model can be used to put the I in risk assessment in novel workplace design.
Thanks, Andrea. Okay, now for some take-home messages before we have a little bit of time for questions. So, some take-home messages. Respecting individual needs, taking a collaborative and holistic approach is essential to making this work. Building an environment of trust and value where individuals feel safe to explore and engage in identifying optimal outcomes. And having a collaborative work environment in which workers feel valued and can trust their employer is essential. Positive workplace culture has never been more important because it underpins effective communication and a sense of safety, sharing needs and requirements. We hope that we're now going to allow time to review the questions you've raised during the presentation. And if you have anything further to ask, please type this in the chat. And please remember, we have provided some examples of conversation starters throughout the presentation, but we also have a handout on this, and this is available via our will be available via our tech team website, and I believe Steph and Maree also have copies for anyone who would like to get in touch with WorkSafe directly. Thank you from the tech team for your time and attention today. We might hand over to Steph to read out some of the questions.
Thank you, Daniella, and thank you, Andrea, for your presentation. So we will now take any questions from the audience, and Liz Freeman and Maree Weber will answer those questions. While we do wait for comments and questions to come through, there are a few reference resources that are here on the slide as well. This webinar has also been recorded and will be made available on the WorkSafe Tasmania YouTube channel. And as Daniella mentioned, we do the conversations data resource is available on the tech website, so the Tasmanian Ergonomic Collaborative website, and we also have a copy here at WorkSafe to send attendees as well. Liz and Maree, a question has come through. Good presentation, by the way. The question is, how do we get executive levels on board with this new approach?
Thank you, Steph. That's a very good question. As we know, workplace culture will be reflected from the top down. I think the bottom line is communication, and it may well be that if health and safety reps could engage with employees with simple non-confronting strategies such as discomfort surveys or satisfaction surveys, and gain some information through their health and safety toolbox regular team meetings, this may be able to be coordinated and sent forward to executives. But also, of course, the conversation starters that Danny has mentioned and that we have developed are great ways, even with executives, to start to introduce a way of thinking. A comment that was made to me about positive workplace culture from a experienced health professional was they asked their employees at the bottom level of the organisation, the cleaners and the kitchen hands, when was the last time the CEO came into your area of the organisation and asked you about what you do and the nature of your day? And I think sometimes encouraging the senior level management to step out of their offices and come down and observe those basic functions can be a great way to initiate conversations and realizations. Thanks, Steph.
Thank you, Maree. And there's still time to submit questions via your questions window on your control panel to our presenters today. And Liz Freeman and Maree Weber from Tas Ergonomic Collaborative are here to answer those questions. And just to remind everyone as well, the conversation starter material which was referenced throughout the presentation is available on the Tech Tas Ergonomic Collaborative website, and we will also provide attendees today with a copy of that document too. Liz and Maree, a comment that has come through. We are a civil construction business which absolutely needs to consider ergonomics. how a body moves relevant to the task undertaken. You may want to comment on that.
Thank you, Steph. That also highlights some really big issues around safety in the workplace, not only physical safety, but also psychosocial safety as well. For civil construction, people are often working on their own and in small groups, and they may be remote to a central location. I think a start point would probably be to go to the Safe Work Australia website and have a look for the code of practice for hazardous manual tasks, because many tasks in civil construction, just by the nature of the heaviness of the task, fall into this category. And this code of practice describes all the risk factors, physical, psychosocial. It gives really good examples of case studies, of looking at risk assessment, of identifying strategies. And I think that would also enable the asker of the question to know that they were complying with the relevant legislation requirements for their jurisdiction. Thank you, Steph.
Thank you, Maree. With no further questions coming through, I'll begin to, oh, actually, my apologies. Maree and Liz, is there additional or are there additional workshops in the biopsychosocial model for all staff?
Sorry, Steph, can you just clarify that?
Yes, I'll repeat. I'll repeat the question. Are there additional workshops in the biopsychosocial model for all staff?
I don't quite understand the question. I'm not sure if the asker is referring to this series under the WorkSafe webinars. There may well be something during this coming week which addresses that. Alternatively, if more knowledge and understanding is required, I would go to the website for the Human Practice and Ergonomics Society of Australia. If you typed in HFESA, you would bring up the website, which would give you information about the biopsychosocial model. Other resources to go to would be, as I've just mentioned, Safe Work Australia. The Code of Practice for hazardous manual tasks covers off on this. The World Health Organization also subscribes to the biopsychosocial model, I beg your pardon, as the preferred model of delivery of all health services, and also the Royal College of General Practice under the health benefits of good work design. They also provide information about that. I'll just pass to Liz to see if she's got anything to add.
I would also add that the Transport Accident Commission in Victoria have a particular handout that they utilise, which has that model as a model of practice for managing injured individuals. I was wondering if the questioner was wondering whether the tech team provide particular further workshops on this, and we haven't been previously asked about this or done one, but I guess we could take something on notice if people were interested. Thanks, Steph.
All right, thank you, Maree and Liz. And the individual who asked that question did come back and say, yes, it was about more knowledge and understanding to enable all staff to understand how it differs to desk adjustment.
Thanks,
So
Steph. I guess, sorry.
Yeah, so just further to that as well, that it exactly is what the individual was asking They work in a Melbourne Metro Stage 4 lockdown Victorian Public Service. So with many examples such as the ones you have presented.
Thanks, Steph. Is there time to address that further, or are we out of time?
Yes, absolutely. No, go ahead.
Oh, sure. I think those references that we've made to biopsychosocial application will be of interest to the person. Just a further thought would be under the Australian government jurisdiction, Comcare. Comcare have a very detailed website where they go into the biopsychosocial model. They talk about a flags model of identifying risk for the person under the risk assessment process, and that may also be quite useful in a step-by-step process. I guess the other thing, just to touch on the words that as separate to a desk assessment, I guess there are two things. There's a basic or screening workstation assessment, which has traditionally just addressed the physical models, but allied health professionals such as physios and OTs are well aware of the biopsychosocial model, and they will include that in all aspects of their assessment, hopefully as part of workstation ergonomics. Thank you, Steph.
Thank you, Maree. So now in closing, thank you to the Tasmanian Ergonomic Collaborative, Daniella Polita, Andrea Ireland, Liz Freeman, Maree Weber, and Lorna Farquhar, who unfortunately wasn't able to be with us today. And thank you everyone for attending today's webinar, Putting the I in Risk Assessment in Novel Workplace Design. Once you leave today's webinar, you will receive a survey on the presentation. We do appreciate you providing us with your feedback. Today's webinar has also been recorded and will be made available on the WorkSafe Tasmania YouTube channel. On behalf of WorkSafe Tasmania and the WorkCover Tasmania Board, thank you for joining us, and thank you to the Tasmanian Ergonomic Collaborative.